finally, we're going to just look at some grammatical aspects of the transitions. I'm just going to focus on a few main points here. When a transitional expression appears at the beginning of a sentence or within an independent clause, I won't have time to explain everything, but I'm highlighting things you should keep in mind, things you need to take screenshots of and maybe do some additional research on your own time, in your own time. So when a transitional expression appears at the beginning of a sentence or within an independent clause, it is generally set off with commas. There are some examples. Meanwhile, comma, blah, blah, blah. So note this comma here. After the meanwhile, you have a comma and then you continue. Same. As a result, comma, add that comma, and then you continue. And then here we have it in an independent clause. What do we call an independent clause? It's a clause that can stand on its own. It doesn't need to be connected to any other clause to make sense, right? It's a complete idea. So here we have many of our competitors. Let us cross out the transitional for now and just read the sentence. Many of our competitors are reluctant to bid for the project. It's an independent clause because it makes sense all by itself. If you want to throw a transitional phrase or a sentence inside of this clause, you're going to surround it with commas. You're going to put a comma before and a comma after. Do you understand? We're looking at the grammar of it. So at the beginning of a sentence, you put the comma right after. Meanwhile, however, furthermore, blah, blah, blah. You put the comma after. If you're going to throw this inside a clause, inside an independent clause, you surround it with commas. So let's say you have the sentence, many of our competitors are reluctant to bid for the project. If you want to put a transition in the middle of that one clause, you surround it with commas like this. Many of our competitors, comma, on the other hand, comma, are reluctant to bid for the project. We have another example here. The first speaker, for example, note the commas, was both professional and entertaining. Now, what if we want to put the transition at the beginning? How would the sentence look? We would say, on the other hand, comma, many of our competitors are reluctant to bid for the project. In that case, we only have one comma because it's at the beginning, just like these. And here, if you want to put this at the beginning, the for example, we could say, for example, comma, the first speaker was both professional and entertaining. Do you understand how these commas are used when you put it at the beginning of a sentence or in the middle of an independent clause? You see the difference? You see the difference? At the beginning here, you have the transitional word or phrase, you have the comma, and then you move on. But if you're putting it in the middle of an independent clause, you put comma on either side of it. You surround it with commas. Right, so remember that point. Next grammatical point. So when a transitional expression links two independent clauses in a compound sentence, it is preceded by a semicolon, and usually set off, meaning after the transition, with a comma. You have a comma. So when we have two independent clauses and we're going to connect them, we're going to have the transitional word or phrase surrounded not by two commas, but by a semicolon and a comma. And guess what? The semicolon could actually be a period and you would actually be fine. The first speaker was professional and entertaining. It's an independent clause because this could be a sentence by itself and you could end it right there, game over. Everybody understands. It's independent. It stands on its own. But let's say you want to connect it to another independent clause. For example, this one. The full program was disappointing. So this is one. Let me try to break it down as clearly as possible. Grammar can be very difficult to grasp. So we have one independent clause here. We have another independent clause here. Why are they independent clauses? Because each one could be a sentence by itself. They don't need to be connected. You can connect them if you want to, but they don't have to be connected. They're fine on their own. So if you want to connect them now, just to really make it clear what the connection between them is, what the relationship between them is, then you throw in the transition, but instead of surrounding it by commas, you have your semicolon, and then you have your comma, right? Or you can actually have a period here, and then you start it with a capital letter. You can do it either way. The first speaker was both professional and entertaining. Nevertheless, the program was disappointing, right? Same here. We have two clauses that could stand on their own. The annual report was critical of budgetary spending. That's a complete thought on its own. The department made the following recommendations. That's also complete on its own. So if you're going to throw in a transition in the middle, what you're going to need to do is put a semicolon, then a comma. Or if you wish, you could end the sentence here and then start the transition with a capital letter. So note the difference between linking two independent clauses and putting this within one single independent clause. In the single independent clause, this is one independent clause, so I'm going to use one color. Many of our competitors are reluctant. This is one. You couldn't just say this on its own. Many of our competitors, full stop. No, it doesn't make sense. The complete clause is many of our competitors are reluctant. So if you're going to throw a transition within that one clause, you surround it by commas, right? If you're going to put the transition at the beginning, then you just write the transition and you put a comma, right? So these are the different ways in which transitions can be used. Depending on how you want your sentence to sound, you can put your transition in various places. And you can use this variation to have different sentence types, different sentence flows, and just to add some spice in your writing, add some variation, so you don't have all the paragraphs sounding or feeling the same. So look at these three examples. They're all basically the same idea, but the transition is placed slightly differently in each case. It was a long and difficult journey, independent clause. However, once we arrived, we were able to relax and enjoy ourselves. Another independent clause. So we have the transition, semicolon, comma. You can write the same sentence like this. It was a long and difficult journey, semicolon, because this is one independent clause, and we're going to attach another independent clause, but this time we're not going to start with the transition. Once we arrived, and now, because the transition is within one independent clause, so now the transition is within the blue, not between the blue and the green, but within the blue, we're going to surround it by commas. Once we arrived, however, we were able to relax and enjoy ourselves. So in case one, the transition is between the two independent clauses. In sentence two, the transition is not between the two independent clauses, but instead within one independent clause. Look at the third example. It was a long and difficult journey. Full stop. So this is a sentence by itself now. Not just a clause, but a full sentence. We start, new sentence, capital letter. However, and we still need the comma. Once we arrived, we were able to relax and to enjoy ourselves. So this one is very similar to this one. The difference is, instead of a semicolon, we just make these two completely different sentences and end it. These are different grammatical ways in which you can add transitions in the sentences. These are all correct. It just depends on how you want a sentence to flow, depends on what you want to emphasize in a sentence. All right. When you use a semicolon, you pull the ideas a little bit closer together than when you use a period. Yeah. All right. That was a little bit technical, but is it clear? You're gonna need to rewatch this now. You're gonna need to revise. I'm not joking. But do you think you're understanding the different grammatical ways in which you can apply the transition so far? Depending on where you want to put it, depending on what punctuation is there, depending on how the dependent or independent clauses connect. It's clear? All right, cool. All right, let's call it a day. So try to keep those grammatical points in mind, and that will definitely set your writing apart and make it clear that you're a master writer. All right, guys, thanks for being here. I'm going to get some sleep.